Our community was even more focused on the state of Israel this past summer than usual, and throughout the Jewish world today, rabbis are speaking about Israel, and I want to do that as well. I'm not planning to spend much time on the security situation of the state of Israel or on Protective Edge, the Israeli operation against Hamas in Gaza. This is not because it's unimportant. Fortunately, at the distance of a month or so, our fears for Israel and Israelis are now transformed into thankfulness for the bravery of the IDF and the resiliency of the Israeli people. I don't want to spend our time together talking about Hamas's intentions. It would be preaching to the choir. Instead, my hope is that we will spend some time considering the meaning of the state of Israel for the Jewish people. It turns out that since last Rosh Hashana, I've spent a lot of time thinking about Israel, reading, teaching, talking with people, even more than usual. I feel as though I learned a lot over the past year, and I feel even closer to Israel now than I did a year ago. I feel lucky to be living as a Jew at a time when there is a state of Israel. I'm in awe of the founders of the state. Their determination in the face of struggle with the land, struggle with those who tried to destroy them, struggle to create a new reality for the Jewish people, that determination continues to be a part of the Israeli personality today. That is something we surely saw this summer. We saw it in the bravery of Rachel Frankel, the mother of Naftali Frankel, one of the 3 Jewish teenagers kidnapped and killed by Hamas earlier in the summer. Here's what she said about the time between her son's kidnapping and receiving the news that her son was dead. Those 18 days, they were filled with the darkest hours, but they were also amazing hours. We discovered our family, our friends, our community, our country, our people. People from all over were saying, "These are not just your boys, these are our children." Sometimes I ask myself, was this just an illusion? I have this image of a person walking in the dark and it's raining and they're stumbling and they're figuring out their way. They don't see anything, and then for a second there's lightning, and in that lightning they see the reality of their surroundings. It helps them guide their way. We had days and days of lightning. It's no illusion what we saw there. Ourselves. We're part of something huge. We're part of a people, of a true family that's for real. Somebody called our home and said, I'm considered a non-affiliated Jew. I want to tell you, I feel so affiliated. Seeing meaning at the time of her greatest distress and grief, Rachel Frankel expresses something about who she is and who we are. Here's another story from the summer. You may remember the day this summer when it was reported that another soldier, Hadar Golden, had been captured by Hamas. Images of Gilad Shalit flashed through our minds. It was discovered later in the day that Golden had been killed on the battlefield. But in the moments when he was thought missing, soldiers believed that he had been taken into one of the many tunnels that Hamas had built, running from Gaza into Israel. There was an interview later with one of the soldiers who was there that day. His name is Segen Eitan. He's viewed as a hero, one of many to emerge from the most recent fighting. Here's why. When it seemed that Hadar Golden had been captured, Eitan asked for permission to go down into the tunnel to find Golden and save him. There are all sorts of reasons that this didn't make rational sense. But in spite of that, he was granted permission, and he went with another soldier. He walked and then ran for hundreds of meters towards Hamas, searching for Golden, a man he didn't really know. Late in the interview, he was asked what he thought about being seen as a hero. He said that he didn't think of himself as a hero. Here's what he said. I was in the right place at the right time. I did what I needed to do. Who cares if I went into that tunnel now? It doesn't matter. People were killed. What does being a hero have to do with it? This is the spirit of the moment. I'm sure that someone would have done this for me, maybe even Hadar. This is the spirit of not leaving anyone behind. This is the spirit of the army. This is the spirit of our country. This isn't bravery. This is Am Yisrael. What Rachel Frankel said, and what Segen Eitan did and said, should make us rightly proud of the state of Israel. But their words also point to something beyond the physical survival of Israel, to the guts of the state, to the meaning of the state. And before I explain what I mean, I want to say that there's no meaning within Israeli society. if there is no state of Israel. The physical survival of Israel has been and continues to be at the top of the Israeli agenda, and that's why you and our Jewish community does so much to support Israel. Based on the neighborhood, that will be a priority for the foreseeable future. But the need for security doesn't eliminate the need for discussion and action regarding the nature of Israeli society. Just ask Israelis. The economic, social, religious, and cultural aspect of Israeli society today are part of the warp and woof of the daily life of Israelis, just as the economic, social, and religious and cultural aspects of American society is what we talk about on a day-to-day basis. To put this another way, the goal of Zionism is not completely fulfilled in the existence of the State of Israel. Just as merely breathing is not the goal of life, existing as a country is not the goal of the State of Israel. Theodor Herzl became the father of Zionism and gets all the glory, but we sometimes forget other early Zionists who had complementary or even opposing Zionist ideologies. One is Achad Ha'am. That was his pen name, actually. His real name was Asher Ginsburg. While he was a secularist, I find that much of what Achad Ha'am had to say about Zionism resonates with me very strongly. Achad Ha'am believed that settling on the land couldn't be the sole goal of Zionism. Here's how he put it. We must take hold of both ends of the stick. On the one side, we must work for the creation of an extensive and well-ordered settlement in our ancestral land. But on the other side, we are not at liberty to neglect the effort to create there, at the same time, a fixed and independent center for our national culture, for learning, art, and literature. To that list, I'd add a center for religious life and growth. Achad Ha'am, writing at the end of the 19th century, speaks in a moment of uncertainty for the Jewish people. Physical dangers coupled with spiritual dangers. The physical danger includes anti-Semitism and violence against European Jewry. The spiritual dangers of assimilation and a loss of connection to Jewish culture, art, and education were resulting in people abandoning their Jewish identity. Because the dangers were complex, Achad Ha'am's solution is complex. A solution which includes the physical security of the Jewish people, that is, creating a home in Israel, and spiritual growth, creating a cultural center in Israel. Sounds a little bit like today, at least for some Jews. The physical dangers to the state of Israel, which have been apparent throughout Israel's history, were joined this past summer by the anti-Semitism that broke out very publicly in parts of Europe. Some were not surprised, but for many, the strength and anger that was loosed upon the Jewish community and individual Jews was surprising and upsetting. But if there are challenges to the physical safety of some Jews today, there's also danger to the Jewish people in much less dramatic ways, through assimilation and acculturation. At the end of Ari Shavit's book, My Promised Land, he talks about his great-grandfather, a British Jew who took a pilgrimage to Israel with a group of early Zionists in 1897. His great-grandfather's trip led to the aliyah of most of the family over the coming generation. He wonders what his family would look like if this hadn't happened. If instead they had remained in England, summered in the Scottish hills, gotten a good British education. One can't know, but he points out that based on the demographics, it's likely that his family wouldn't be Jewish anymore. They would have assimilated, lost touch with the patterns of Jewish life and Jewish community. We know this story here in the U.S. as well. We're struggling against this, and we are rightly worried. Just a few weeks ago, one of our congregants sent me an article about the growing openness within the Jewish community to conversion, that is, especially within the Reform and Conservative movements. He was wondering, since assimilation, low birth rates, and intermarriage are radically reducing the number of Jews in the U.S., perhaps this is something that we should actively pursue. I happen to think that we could be doing a better job of reaching out to those who would truly appreciate being a part of the Jewish community. But it does say something about where we are as a community if we are hoping to stabilize our numbers by bringing in new Jews rather than raising Jews who will be committed to the Jewish people. Achad Ha'am recognized that the Jewish people needed to enhance their physical security and their spiritual and cultural growth. He envisioned a home for the Jews in Israel and an active, flowering center of Jewish life and culture in Israel. For those of us who love Israel, we marvel at the way this vision has become a reality in so many ways. But what of the spirit of the Jewish people overall? Yes, Israel has a full and unique culture, but what Achad Ha'am envisioned was a center of Jewish culture in Israel, which would transform the Jewish people throughout the world. No one can deny that we are all impacted by the state of Israel, but I'd argue that we haven't fully arrived. There's more work to be done on this score. Our understandable focus on Israel's security has prevented us as a community from fully engaging in the values, culture, and challenges of the state of Israel. We love Israel. We need to work for Israel. We need to support Israel. But we also need to ask ourselves, and we need to be in conversation with our brothers and sisters in Israel about what Israel will be and what the Jewish people will be. That conversation will not only strengthen Israel, but strengthen us. It strengthens us because it can engage us in a conversation about who we are, how Jewish tradition can shape us, and shape the state of Israel. And I want to give you two examples of this. I don't know when you last took a good look at Israel's Declaration of Independence, but it's worth reading. Here's what it says in part. The state of Israel will be open for Jewish immigration and for the ingathering of the exiles. It will foster the development of the country for the benefit of all its inhabitants. It will be based on freedom, justice, and peace as envisaged by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions, and it will be faithful to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. We could spend many hours just talking about these few lines, but here are the highlights. We have here the idea of a Jewish state which welcomes all Jews within its borders. Big, beautiful words that we as Americans love: freedom, justice, and peace. Allusions to Jewish values and the prophets of the Bible, as well as freedom of religion, freedom of conscience. But that's not all we have here, because within these words are some of the greatest internal challenges for the state of Israel. Front page news items, all of them. Yes, a state that welcomes all Jews, but one which continues to figure out the separation of synagogue and state, which continues to support a Haredi, ultra-Orthodox rabbinate at the expense not only of conservative, Masorti, and Reform Jews, but one which effectively distances the large secular majority and alienates them from the roots, texts, and practices of the Jewish people. Yes, a state which supports freedom and justice, but one which has a very large gap between the rich and the poor, with 20% of the population below the poverty level. A state which hasn't fully lived up to the promise of equality to Israeli Arabs. Yes, a country with freedom of religion and conscience, and considering some of the challenges in this area, a country which has done remarkable things, and yet a country which continues to argue about the limits of free speech, a country in which the rights of women are sometimes subordinated to the values of the most extreme parts of the Haredi community. Here's the thing. These are all values which we, as supporters of Israel, as Jews, and as Americans know a lot about, because these are our values. These are values that we care about. These are values that we can join in conversation with Israelis. We don't expect that Israel should have everything figured out. We in the United States, having been around more than 200 years, haven't figured it out yet. There's no end to this process of building a society. But perhaps being a Zionist means that you too can and should be a part of this conversation, even from across an ocean. But if we want to be part of that conversation, we need to earn it. We really need to know Israeli society well. Here's the second example of how Jewish tradition can shape us and the state of Israel. How we can both connect with Israel over something very Jewish and very topical and Zionist, and not at all about the security situation. Today begins the Shemitah year, the sabbatical year. The Torah tells us that on the 7th year of a 7-year cycle, there can be no farming of the land lies fallow. The people will eat the 6th year's produce and whatever grows from the land naturally, from the perennials. All produce that grows during the 7th year is ownerless. You can walk onto someone's land, pick the fruit that is there, just enough to feed you. You can't sell it. Also on the 7th year, all loans are forgiven. If you haven't fully paid back a loan, it was forgiven. It's quite unbelievable, actually, what the Torah teaches. It's a huge upheaval in the agricultural and economic system, and it happens every 7 years. I taught a course over the past 3 weeks about how these laws worked, how they were transformed by our rabbis, and how they apply today in Israel. The laws of the Shemitah are very real for all Israelis this year. That is, every Israeli that you know knows something about these concepts. When they go to the store or the shuk this year, they will see signs which tell them about how their produce was grown, where it was grown, how it relates to these laws of the Shemitah. And yet, most American Jews have no idea what Shemitah is. Imagine, laws from thousands of years ago, brought to life in the land of Israel, in the state of Israel. This is part of what our ancestors dreamed about for centuries. Now, these laws don't all apply in a straightforward way today, but one Israeli figure who's playing a very active role in enhancing the Jewish nature of Israel today is Ruth Calderon, a minister of the Knesset and a secular Jew. She's taking to heart the Torah's concern that people not fall into poverty through debt, and she's starting a fund called Matan, which will help debt-ridden Israeli families get out of debt and restart their lives. Jews in Israel and the U.S. are talking about ways to incorporate the values of care for the land, the value of community, the value of rest and rejuvenation that are inherent in the practice of Shemitah. Jewish people, Jewish land, Jewish lives, all together. What I'm saying is that our love for Israel needs to continue to deepen around issues that go beyond the physical safety of Israel. That growing depth will impact the state of Israel, the Jewish community in the diaspora, and you personally. We share the responsibility to ensure that physical existence of the state of Israel, and we will continue to live up to that responsibility. But there's more to our responsibility as part of the Jewish people, and we need to continue to strive to live up to that. Because the promise of the state of Israel is greater than what you can see on the map. The promise is wrapped up in our values. The values of Am Yisrael, the people of Israel that Rachel Frankel and Segan Eitan personify, the values of freedom, democracy, that the Israeli Declaration of Independence express, and the values of Torah and Jewish tradition that Israel's engagement with the sabbatical year express, which are possible to bring to life in the Jewish state. My hope is that will all be worthy to further the journey of Am Yisrael in the coming year by learning and spreading these values throughout our lives and the life of Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael Chai.